The 38th parallel, which divides the two Koreas today, was created as a way for compromise, but only for a short period of time. After the fall of the Soviets, the boundary became permanent, leaving North and South Korea to become neighbors. No communication was done, but before the armistice was set into place, a ton of conflict was occurring. Northern Korea followed the way of communist ideals, and the southern counterpart grew apart and acquired aid from the US. Before Korea's war began, World War II was taking place. During this time, Korea fell under Imperial Japan control. After the defeat of Japan by the US atomic bomb in 1945, Korea reconstructed itself with a suitable government. This, however, left them in turmoil of conflict, with North siding with the communist nations and the southern counterpart seeking a democratic government. This all had to do with the major political party leader Kim Il-sung's affiliation with the Stalin of the USSR and Mao of the People's Liberation Army. Considering these factions, compromise did arise. Kim Il-sung's ranking was made possible by the Japanese colonization, whom forced Sung's parents to flee to Manchuria, China in the 20s. Sung joined a movement to fight the conflicting Japan. Soviets, taking notice, recruited him, farther improving and persuading Sung with communist ideas. Therefore, he became more of an importance. Once Japan had retreated in 1945, Sung had Korea in full mind. With the support of Soviet troops, Korea was established back, and Sung had won the Soviets' trust, making him become North Korea's president in 1948. With this power, Sung provided troop support to People's Liberation Army of China, who were on the communist side against the nationalists. North Korea's ties with China and the Soviets had increased dramatically. Syngman Rhee, on the other hand, had attended a Methodist school where he converted to Christianity and learned English. Also, being Korean, he joined a faction in order to fight back Japan for Korean independence. This led him to be arrested for rebellious acts. After this time, he settled in the US, where he earned a PhD in 1910. Afterwards, he returned to Korea. Unfortunately, Japan had colonized Korea during this time, and therefore Rhee returned to the US, but this time in Hawaii. In Hawaii, again, he practiced activism. The Japan attacks were unexpected, but it did leave Korea alone from Japan. Korea therefore needed a government that could work. Rhee became involved in the US and had settled the US needed an official to run for the people of Korea, and Rhee worked perfectly with himself being Korean and having the rightist views like America. He took America's offer to become president in 1948, leading a democratic government. However, the re-emerging of Korea did not happen at all. U.S. forces located themselves south of the peninsula and planned to protect it. In 1950, the Korean War commenced, with North Korea having permission from the Stalin to attack with the support of Korea and the Soviets. The Rhee army did withstand at Han River, just south of the capital. As an immediate response, Truman ordered Douglas MacArthur to support the South Koreans. President Truman made MacArthur commander-in-chief of the United Nations in June 25, 1950, due to his mass experience taking part of World War II. The UN troops were involved, and the US soldier made up the majority of the army that will soon attack and reclaim Seoul in the Battle of Incheon and reclaim Seoul. The troops were sent to the south and reclaimed the capital in a successful attack. This therefore led MacArthur in popularity to continue attacking farther up north to Unchan, just above Pyongyang. The Chinese forces responded to this attack, pushing American troops far back in the Battle of Onchong on October 25, 1950. The following year, MacArthur's intentions were against China, this time with the support of the nationalists who fought against communism. Now, it was a battle of dominance between the communists and the US, which was a terrible fight with the nuclear capabilities that they had just discovered. President Truman had enough of MacArthur's arrogance in fear of World War III and fired him on April 15, 1951. This therefore led Matthew Ridgway to take command, who previously was in charge of the 8th Army of Korea. Taking his old role was General James Fleet. May 30th, 1951. Ridgway underwent Operation Piledriver in conquering the Iron Triangle, which was abandoned by the communists. This was risky due to the fact that they were prohibited by May 30th not to proceed and farther past the 38th parallel by the Joint Chief of Staff.
Truman was fed up with the continuation of the war and had George Kennan, the ambassador of the U.S. to the Soviets, be contacted for possible negotiations with the Koreans. They agreed. Sung and General Peng held a meeting at Kaesong of July 8, 1951, in hopes of a negotiation compromise. During this time, out of the area, Pyongyang was bombed and apparently United Nations troops had illegally entered the neutral Kaesong area. October 25th, another negotiation was set in Panmunjom finally made a decision of having the divisions of the nations be divided by the 38th parallel. This was all well and done, but another deal was set for North Korea to get their air bases back and return to give the Northern Korean prisoners of war a choice to return back to North Korea or not. There was no settlement, and it left Ridgway's choice of bombing the whole city of Pyongyang. The small instances of United Nations and United States troops attacking Northern Korea was unjustified and disregarded the main plan. You could say there was conflict with the US, with the executive and the armies in regards to the communication or possible views. But how could a professional nation not work well in long distances? It's a war that's meant to be held captive, not given to certain people to run rampant. With the successful negotiations of the divisions, Truman's term came to an end, and now Eisenhower came to office in January 20th, 1953, with a popular landslide vote and hopes to end the Korean War. The Communist Chinese made an assault on Hill 255, known as the Battle of Porkchop Hill, on July 6, with the retreat of the US and UN soldiers. This was assumed to be done by Eisenhower to have the Communists have their victory and further improve the relationship, even though conflict did cause compromise. In Panmunjom, the final negotiation occurred, which finally ended the Korean War. The document was an armistice of the Korean War, and it held two major deals. The first was a demilitarized zone, which was the divide of Korea, each holding their own territory, without the invasion of the other. A long stretch of land in between, which is 2.5 miles wide, and their distances apart. The second deal was about the armies they hold. Both the newly South and North Korea had to have the same number of troops to prevent again anyone getting an upper hand. The unification promised was never met, but they were given $1 billion for their damages of the war and protection from the US. The money did not properly fund the Koreans, and they continued to live in poverty while Ri was still in office. His fourth term was the last straw for Koreans who had student protesters wanting Ri out of office. They were killed of March in 1952. It had worked, and Ri resigned. The public had previously wanted a parliamentary system, and they set into place in July 29, 1960. This government, however, quickly disbanded due to mass argument with every party involved, and a third republic came to be with the military force in 1963. The leader was run by Park Chung-hee, and they implemented a system called the 5 Years Plan in order to focus more on their reconstruction and not on government. The first of the documents was set into place in 1962, which focused on the production of energies to power up the poor nation. The second in 1967, the production of manufactured goods was placed in order to compete with the markets of the rest of the world. The third in 1972 had made it possible for South Korea to produce chemicals. These documents have been continued to be made and had set their government to focus on the issues the plans dispute about. Today, South Korea has prospered and is the 14th ranked country for the gross domestic products. North Korea continued their way with dictatorship and improved a lot faster than South Korea right after the war. North Korea had experienced a great leap forward, or a so-called industrial revolution, paired with mainly China in 1958. They focused on the improvement of technology, which was significant, but the cost was much more, and had killed over 2 million North Koreans. The US, South Korea, China, and Japan sought out to help bring in tons of food with the not-so-agricultural North Koreans. But it wasn't enough, and North Korea was focused more on their army instead of the public. Only the political Sung had the benefit creating a workers' party in 1975, which was supported his and only power of dictatorship. They also joined the Non-Aligned, which isolated themselves and prohibited communication with other nations for the public to not know. Today they aren't technologically advanced due to the isolation of technology, which is needed for a nation to grow. Their major trade partner is China, and they're still mutual, but don't compete with other nations in money too well. It's said their people undergo poverty. The Korean conflict is now called the Forgotten War, as Ted Clark, a soldier of the US Air Force, said. The war did bring a massive toll in deaths, with the casualties bunching up to 37,000 deaths on the small peninsula. But it wasn't fully settled. The division at the time was just meant for nations to recover to continue fighting afterward. Although the fight could be seen as pointless since relations were not settled, but the demilitarized zone had caused the compromise of the Korean War till this day, even if the two weren't united. This does topple over the fact that two did try performing acts of compromise with the negotiations they'd had.